Welcome back to another Fabulous Story channel. I'm Jacob from Jacob's Books Corner, and normally we're in front of my book corner, but for this video, I don't own most of these novels since it's my top 10 worst books of the year. We are in front of my green screen. Obviously, there's a background and the whole 9 yards. And I also want to mention that the top 10 best books is already out as well, or should be out after this video. Once again, I'm not really sure the order I'm posting these in. So yeah, so if you want to check that out, you totally can. I'm also doing the reading survey, and I'm assuming that's probably coming out today as well, since I'm a little bit late to the new year. All right, let's get started. I do have 4 books that I want to list off that are disappointments before we jump into the top 10. I'd also like to mention the top 10. I do have a reread. I tried not to add rereads in like overall lists, and then my number 10 is not actually a worst book, but I need a 10th book, so there we go. So let's talk about my disappointments. My disappointments go as following: as I had expectations for them and they didn't live up to those hypes, but they're not like a 2 or a 1 star, which is all what my top 10 worst books are. So let's talk about. The first one we're going to talk about is Six of Crows by Wayward Some. I do have a whole review on Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. It is not uploaded as this is a very popular and beloved series that I was really nervous to upload. So if you want to see my actual really thoughts while I read them and stuff, let me know in the comments down below, as I can post that. It just makes me a little nervous, you know what I mean? But that's okay. I do have it. I have the footage. It's from like April of last year. So Six of Crows, I just did not like the writing here, and I could not connect with any of the characters. It wasn't until Crooked Kingdom that I really started to enjoy this one, and by the time the duology was over, I was kind of sad, but also wasn't really ready to move on to Nikolai's, so I still have not read Nikolai's duology. Next one is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. For Your Own Good is Samantha Downing's third outing as a thriller author, and her third thriller I thought was spectacular. It was so much better than most thrillers I read that year, but He Started is by far one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I have to reread it to really confirm that, but I'm like 98% sure it's like one of my favorite thrillers of all time. And so For Your Own Good just did not live up to any of those hype. This was highly hyped in my brain, but also this was a really basic thriller. There wasn't anything cutting edge about it. There wasn't anything that made me feel like it was different, which those first two really felt like they were something completely different from the genre. They took a very simple concept and they really twisted it, where this one, the only big thing that you know early on in the story is who is doing the murdering, and you get to see the consequences wheeled out in front of them, and that's about it. And ironically, there is actually another one that we'll talk about that's very similar to that concept, but I just think, I don't know, it just did not live up to my hype, which is really sad. The next one is The Violent Delight by Chloe Gong. I was so looking forward to These Violent Delight. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year. Everybody was talking about it. It was like one of the most hyped books of the year, and it's just, I just did not care for this romance whatsoever. And actually, it's the romance section that I did not like the most. I think it was way overhyped because it wasn't anything that I actually wanted. Not wanted, that I believed that was actually happening. The next one is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Normally I don't have any problems with Cassandra Clare writing, but for this one I had a rough time getting into it, and then I took a break from it, and then I came back to it, and then I read it on too fast of a speed. It just, we didn't click. This first time went around, we didn't click. I also was really pissed off by a lot of the story changes, or I should say more like a lot of the world changes that were changed here. There's a lot of actions and moments that I believe as a Shadowhunters, as they would progress and get older, they would mention it. It would be in history books, and it's never mentioned, which I find to be really shocking, especially because certain things that happen in Chain of Gold really reflect the events that happen in Queen of Air and Darkness. And I don't know if it's because I read them so close together that I started to pick up on those moments, and they're not really even talked about or explained. And so I do wonder if at one point Wicked Powers book 1 was supposed to come out like simultaneously, and then they didn't because of whatever the reason might be, because I know these ones got pushed a lot, like the new ones just got pushed, so like I don't know. So I wasn't a huge fan. I do think Chain of Iron really did redeem Chain of Gold, and I'm really excited to reread it. All right, let's jump into the top 10. The first one is Dune by Frank Herbert. I could not tell you what Dune is about, so don't ask. I read this because Timothy had a new movie coming out, and I wanted to see it. And yeah, I was told Dune was great. I didn't really like Dune. I think I gave Dune a 2 stars. I think it was probably more like around a 3. I know how the book was produced now, and I kind of understand my problems with it. There's a lot of monologues, inner monologues, outer monologues. There's also not a lot of action, and for mine, I need some action. I also need a good romance, and this one has a pretty good romance, but it doesn't end up showing up until like maybe 60% into the book. So like it was just a little too late for me to like really dive into it, and I had such a hard time getting into it in the first 40% that by the time I got there, I was kind of over it. It was a whole experience, you know what I mean? Number 9 is Someday, Maybe by Lauren Graham. This is already a really high anticipated book for me because of Lauren Graham, the author. I love her as an actress, and I just really ended up not liking and Frankie. Plus, on top of that, Lauren Graham is she's the one who narrates the audiobook. And so when you're listening to it and Franny's doing all these horrible things, you're like, oh my god, did Lauren Graham do all these horrible things? In reality, she probably didn't as a character, but I really took it really personally for some reason for this one. Also, there is a lot of fatphobic stuff in it, and it's not really clear towards the end, and I just didn't think there was like a bigger message to it. I didn't think it was needed, even if it was okay with the time period. Not that it's okay with the time period, that I understood why the discussion was there because of the time period. That was their answer. Okay, number 8 is Wayward Some by Rainbow Rowell. This is my reread, but in its defense, I didn't remember shit about it because it's a boring ass book. There's really no points for Wayward Some. This is book 2 in the Carry On trilogy, and I just could not decide. This book follows our two main characters as they are broken up on a road trip that literally has no meaning for the third novel. So what's the point? Who knows? Not me. Number 7 is The Flight Attendant by Chris Bohan. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I always feel like I pronounced that wrong. I read this because of the TV show The Flight Attendant, which I think does the story so much better. Sorry for anybody who likes the book. The book gives away the murderer like 30% into the book, or I really guessed it really well, and I was not surprised. It was like, for your own good, and I just got to experience the outcome, but by the end, I didn't care about the outcome. I just did not enjoy this book. It was a very highly anticipated book for me this year, and it was just so disappointing. Number 6 is Layla by Colleen Hoover. Layla, specifically, it follows someone who's in a band. He ends up meeting a girl at a concert. They end up spending like 6 months together. She ends up getting shot and killed by a crazy stalker. Crazy stalker also ends up getting shot and killed, and they both come back to life, so forth and so forth, and the story progresses from there. There's all about rehabilitation and some ghost play. There is a line of consent that is crossed here that I just could not come back from, and it was crossed multiple times. This has been used in several books over the past few years that I just am tired of the trope. I'm gonna say it's a trope now because I've seen it in multiple mediums, that I'm tired of it, and I'm not okay with it. And that's my own personal opinion. They do write it off in the end, and it has a good reason or whatever, but I don't like it. And I didn't really like the ending either, so I think all that plays a factor. Number 5 is Infinity Reaper by M. Severa. This is book 2 in the Infinity Cycle. Book 1 is, I don't remember. I have it over there. But I thought that the first one was okay. I was really looking forward to the second one due to the fact it was really longer and it had a pretty good cliffhanger ending the first one did. This one has a character named Brighton Ray, which is one of the main characters in the source material, and he is just so annoying that it ruined the entire book. Every time I started to jazz with it and I was like, oh, I think I'm okay with where this is going, he would pop up and I'd be like, eh, maybe not, and I'd back away. And that's basically how my whole entire feeling for Infinity Reaper was. So if you want to try it out and you like the first book, you'll probably love the second book. I didn't really care for the first book, and I was really hoping I'd love it by the second one. It's fine. Number 4 is Survive the Night by Riley Sagar. This follows Charlie as she is traveling across the country with who she believes is the killer. The book is set in the 90s. She's coming from a campus where there is a campus killer, and so forth and so forth. Charlie's an unreliable narrator. She has I'm pretty sure it's schizophrenia, if I'm not mistaken, or something under those lines, and it's used as a plot device, so take that in mind when you read it. And my problem here is that Riley Sagar has a very specific trope that he likes to use in the third act to tell you who the killer is every single time. And I really thought, because of the concept of this book, it wasn't going to happen, because I was like, there's no way that one thing can happen, and then boom, I didn't think about the other people in the room. Yes. I don't want to spoil it, but just know it made me so mad I started to scream like at work. It was a problem. Number 3 is All Things Seeks to Appear by Elizabeth Bernadette. The first thing I want to take note by this book is that there is no punctuation when it comes to dialogue. So in that regard, it can be extremely hard to read. So do err on the caution of that. The story itself follows a man who is accused of murdering his wife as he runs off to the next door neighbor's house where his wife is murdered. He's like a suspect. That's really like the minimalist plot of it, because it does not really follow it. This has really graphic things inside the novel that were like pointless. All the characters were really unlikable, which is normally fine with a thriller, but this one wasn't really thrilling, and so it was just more annoying. I also didn't really like the plot lines. I didn't like anything about this book, to be honest with you. And then I saw it because the movie Things Heard, No Here Seen, or something like that, with Amanda Seyfried. It was on Netflix in like October, and it was pretty bad as well. It had a bigger message about religion that I didn't pick up from the actual like text. Number 2 is Hot Asaurus Summer by Lola Foss. This just really does prove that you can read a book like 2 days before you film a video about your top 10 worst books, and it can pop up in there. Because I read this on December 31st, the evening of December 30th going to December 31st, and now we're here on January 2nd filming this video. So there we go. This follows our young protagonist as she is falling in love with dinosaurs. By falling in love, I mean this is is dinosaur porn in the most graphic way possible. There's really no point for this book to exist, and yet I read it. It has an extremely disturbing scene revolving an arm that I will never forget or get out of my brain. So yeah, I kind of hate myself for reading it in that regard. Number one, I don't think I've talked about it a lot, so you guys probably don't know, but when I did talk about it in both my wrap up and the video that it was presented in, I absolutely hated it. So like, I think maybe it's possible. I don't know. Number one is All the Beautiful Lies by Pierce Swanson. This is a story about a dad who is untimely killed and his son who's from college comes home and stays with his stepmom. In reality, this is really a story about cycle of violence and abuse from generation set into a thriller-like setting with a kind of shitty plot line with really shitty outcomes that make no sense, and an author who is trying to make something bigger than what it is because of the content that he was trying to write, and I just don't think could do it, is like my biggest takeaway from this book. I don't know if that's a good takeaway. I don't really know how you should feel about said takeaway, but that's my personal one. The apparent sexual like essay stuff that's inside this novel is here for mostly shock value in my opinion, and there really isn't anything that comes out of it, and like if it's used in a thriller for shock value, I think it's really gross, and so this just kept rubbing me the wrong way. The more and more I listened to it, the more and more I wanted to stop listening to it, but I was so close to the ending that I finished it, and it got 1 star. I only gave a few books 1 star this year. It just happened to be one of them. I also hated it more than Hot Asaurus Summer, which I don't think I can hate something more than dino porn, but it exists. Let me know what you guys' top 10 worst books are, and tell me the reasons why, as I'm always curious, and if I should read any of them. Let me know in the comments down below. And I'll talk to you guys all soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.